Good morning, buenos dias. I'm another poster child of mobility from poverty, and I'm never going to forget my roots. Even though I'm a social scientist, and I know that social science has learned a great deal about poverty since the mid-1960s, including that there is much more to learn. But that's not a reason to stop there. Molly Orshansky, an economist working in the Social Security Administration, developed the thresholds based on the cheapest food plan developed by USDA at the time. She multiplied the food value by 3 based on shaky evidence that families of 3 or more persons spent about 1/3 of their disposable income on food. In fairness, she lacked good data about the lives of poor people and their families. There was a modest tweaking of the thresholds over time, notably price adjustments, but not cost of living adjustments for a long time. For decades, Orshansky's assumption about food and non-food expenditures was largely maintained to represent income adequacy. Housing, heat, transport, clothing triggered by family events such as divorce, clothing, health, and all other needs, including taxes, were covered by the remaining 2/3 of disposable income. First-generation studies of poverty used these thresholds for decades, flawed though they were, to track variations in poverty by race, by age, by household size, number of children, nativity status. In all, most research characterized poverty as rates that rose and fell over time. First-generation studies also characterized poverty as a cultural syndrome that was internalized and therefore resistant to change. Images of welfare queens made for good political fodder, but were divorced from the daily lives and the struggles of low-income families. Second-generation studies were spawned by William Julius Wilson, who called attention to the spatial concentration of poverty, asking whether poor people living in very poor places differed from poor people in general. Concurrently, Mary Jo Bain and David Elwood galvanized the poverty research by showing that poverty was highly dynamic phenomenon, as Wes just pointed out, triggered by family events beyond control, such as divorce or death of a breadwinner. And there was considerable churning around the poverty threshold, families whose incomes fell above or below that low threshold, depending on variations in income sources and family events. Insights from these second-generation studies about the dynamics of poverty in high-poverty places were brought to life by qualitative researchers like Kathy Eden and Matt Desmond, whose research put faces on the statistics and vividly portrayed how working families are just one paycheck away from car repossession, from eviction, from suspension of utility service, and from hunger. The paycheck share spent on food is irrelevant when there is no paycheck. This is true both in urban neighborhoods and public housing complexes, as well as rural Appalachia and South Texas, where I'm from. The recent partial government shutdown brought this message into sharp relief as workers earning multiples of the official minimum wage showed up at food banks. So even if research has provided valuable insights about the dynamics of poverty, there is less clarity about what it'll take to move families sustainably out of poverty. This is why third-generation studies like those pioneered by Professor Raj Chetty and his colleagues that focus both on time and place is so important. Today's conversations will begin with a deep dive into richly textured national and local data to learn what new insights and what policy levers are possible for fighting poverty and forging sustainable pathways from poverty.